Hello, good morning, one and all.
Good morning, madam.
Yeah, good morning. So let us begin today's topic. Last week we were in this IP Act. So in continuation to that one, we have talked about the electronic signature, digital signature. Yeah, we completed this one. No? So now we will move to this electronic signature. So are you able to see the screen, ma?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, madam. Yes.
So as we understand, electronic signature certificate has a certain laws which has been issued by the government of India. So it comes under section 35 and the digital signature was also part of that one. Now we will move to the electronic e-governance. Yeah. So what is that you understand by e-governance? So this is something where there is a provision for the appointment of controller for certifying authorities. Yeah, like government agencies use this information and communication technologies to transform relations with citizens, business, and other government agencies. Yeah, that means what? Basically, it is something the smart governance that is being used by the ruling parties or by anybody. Now we see that e-governance is something where everything is digital and they are using the ICT technologies. So there are some prime objectives of IT Act 2000 in promotion of electronic governance. So what these special provisions are being listed under Chapter 3 to grant legal recognitions to electronic records, signatures, yeah, and also encourage the government and its agencies to use them. So Chapter 3 of IT Act 2000, under the sections 4 to 10A, it deals with the e-governance with special references. So here we have to understand that, under IT Act, there could be certain, rules and regulations. But then what we are trying to talk about the e-governance is part of Chapter 3, Section 4, 10A. So under that, we see that there is an application of ICTs to the process of the government functioning. Then we have technology-driven governance. Then we have purpose. Yeah. Then it is for, these are basically the objectives. So when we are talking about the government functioning, it is for delivering the government services. That is now the best example is Me Seva, and every government we have a TS wallet and all those things. Yeah. Then we have exchange of information, communication, transactions. Yeah. Apart from that, also we see that if we are doing the payments and all those things like electricity bills and all those things are also part of that one. Apart from that, also in the public life, also we see that we follow digital transactions. E-banking, internet banking, and all those things. Then the integration of various state-alone systems and services. So basically here we have groups. It is the services have been taken by government to customer, then government to employees, government to government, and government to business. So use of electronic records and digital signatures is allowed by government and its agencies only. So there are different provisions under IT Act 2000 related to the electronic records and e-governance. So the first one is legal recognition of electronic records, which is being taken under Section 4, and Section 5 talks about the digital signatures. So electronic records is part of IT Act under Section 4, and the digital signature is part of Section 5. The use of electronic records and digital signatures in the government and also its agencies is also part of Section 6, and Section 7 is talking about the retention of electronic records, and talking about electronic gazettes publication. It is Section 8. Also, we see that there is no right to insist on the acceptance of documents in the electronic form, which is part of Section 9, and Section 10 talks about the central government power to make rules pertaining to the digital signature. So here otherwise also we see that, for filling any form, application or any document, it has been controlled by the appropriate government in a particular manner. The issue or grant of any license, permit, sanction or approval by whatever name called in a particular name, and the receipt of the payment in a particular manner is all been monitored and been taken care by the government. That is how we see that there is a law, and if you feel any kind of disturbances or if any kind of misuse, then definitely we can go and refer to this laws. So such requirement shall be deemed to have been satisfied if such filing, issue, grant, receipt is effected by means of electronic forms. And in any information or other matter should be in writing in that, and it should be in the printed form. Then only it will be considered as an electronic record. So the appropriate government may prescribe a particular manner and format in which electronic records should be filed. This is basically if you are working for an organization and if you are working into IT cell, where you can see that, how you could maintain the electronic records. So there are certain do's and don'ts which talks about, particular systematic prescribed formats. Then you have to authorize the service provider to set up, maintain, and upgrade the computerized facilities to offer services in a specific service provider. Government to offer services through electronic means in accordance with the policy governing such if it is related to the service sector. The service provider is authorized to collect, retain, and appropriate service charges. So we see that, the government may decide the manner or the method of payment of any fee or charges for filing and creation and issue of any electronic record under clause A. So there is also an provision for the government also is an authority to provide these service providers collect, retain, and appropriate service charges under this section, notwithstanding the fact that there is no express provision under the Act, rule, regulation, which the service is provided to collect, retain, and appropriate e-service charges by the service providers. Basically, it means to say that, that they can collect the service charges. So the government shall specify the scale of service charges which may be charged and collected by the service providers. So now, how do we have a legal recognition of the electronic records, which comes part of the section 4? First one, it has to render or made available in an electronic form. Then it should be accessible and usable for a subsequent references. So authentication of electronic records means that any subscriber may authenticate an electronic record by affixing his digital signature. So digital signature gives a real authentication for your electronic record. Here we see that it can be affected by the use of asymmetric crypto system and hashed functions which envelopes. This is a bit technical, and this is how we see that they have been protected by the technical programming. So electronic record yields the same hash result every time the algorithm is being executed with the same electronic record. Any person by the use of a public key of the subscriber, there is basically a public key. So for the digital, which is basically happening at the government level, and as an organization also you can have it. Okay. So, but as a common person, we may not use that one. So the private key and the public key are unique to the subscribers. That is how there is a protection and it safeguards that way. Then the initial electronic record was affixed with the digital signature by a private key corresponding to the public key of the subscriber. It is well retained intact and has been altered since such electronic record was there. So it was in the beginning, it came as a private key, then it is a public key. These are the unique features of the electronic records. Then we have validity of contracts formed through electronic means, where we see that, the contract formation, the communication of the proposals, the acceptance of the proposals, the revocation of the proposals, as the case may be, are expressed in electronic forms or by means of an electronic records. Such contracts shall be deemed to be enforceable solely on the ground that such electronic forms or means was used for that purpose. What basically they mean to say is that, in case if there is any execution of the contract or there is a proposal or something, so all this will be valid only when we see that, they are have been through a proper electronic means, and they can, if they are, following those certain rules and regulations, then that can be accepted. Then attribution, acknowledgement, and dispatch of electronic records. An electronic record should be attributed to, if it is sent by the originator himself, it has to be acknowledged by a person who had the authority to act on behalf of the originator. Then it is, you will have an acknowledgement receipt. Then you will have to have a time and place of dispatch and receipt of electronic record. For the purpose of this, we see that, the originator address has to have more than one place of business. Principal's usual place of residence should be deemed to the place of business or wherever it is registered. So somehow we see that, this digital signatures has some do's and don'ts that has to be followed. Even in the terms of this electronic gazette under the section 8, we see that, any rule, regulation, order, by law, notification shall be published in the official gazette. Then such requirement shall be deemed to have been satisfied. So if such rule, regulation, order, by law, notification, or any other matter is published in the official gazette or electronic gazette, the date of publication should be deemed to be the date of the gazette. So these are the certain things that we see during the electronic records to be of the maintenance in terms of the public, private, transactions, and as well as the government. And also we see that, that there are certain certificates being issued by the central government, and central government has the power to make rules in respect of the electronic signature. It talks about the type of the electronic signature. It talks about the manner and the format it should be, and it talks about the, the facilities and identification of the person affixing the signature, and it talks about the control process and procedures to ensure the safety and security and confidentiality of the electronic signature and the records. And at the same time, we see that, there are certain penalties and adjudications. That means that, if you are by passing the laws, or if you see that there are certain things, then there are certain penalties and adjudications. So it is a, penalty and compensation for damage to computer or computer system. In case if somebody is trying to harm that one, then you have a compensation for failure to protect the data. Suppose if any organization fails to protect the sensitive data or the information in the computer and is negligent in implementing this one, so they are liable to pay damages. Then you have penalty for failure to furnish information or to return the information. Then you have the power to adjudicate. Yeah. Then you have decision by majority. If the members of the bench consisting of two members, differ on the opinion related to the tribunal, then they can go by the majority. Then you have a procedure and powers of the appellate tribunal also. How do you approach it? So when you have all these problems, you have an appellate tribunal where they will take care of your issues. Then you have recovery of penalty or compensation as well. So this is about the penalty. Then what are the offenses we see in the IT communication technologies? So it is well known and we understand. So this is tampering with computer source documents. Yeah. Then it is about computer related offenses. This we see very much in our daily life in the social media, right? So these computer related offenses. Then we see, then there is a particular system where we need to have to protect our data and all those things. So we have Indian Computer Emergency Response Team under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology of Government of India. They help in collection, analysis, and dissemination of information on cyber incidents. They forecast and alert about the cyber security incidents. They also take an important and emergency measures for handling cyber security incidents. Yeah. Then there is a penalty for misrepresentation. Yeah, like giving misinformation or disinformation So there is a penalty for that one, and a penalty for the breach of your contract or confidentiality or privacy also there is a scope for that one. Then there is a punishment for disclosure of information in breach of lawful contract. Then there is a penalty for publishing false certificate in certain particulars. Yeah. Then you have confiscation in case if you are overboarded in doing or breaking the laws. Then you have compensations, penalties, or confiscation not to interfere with other punishment. There are also to be noticed that there are compounding of offenses. Then offenses with 3 years imprisonment to be liable, to bailable. Then power of police officers and other officers to enter search. In this IT, we see that, they don't have to wait for the warrant and all those things. So they have a special power. Then punishment for abatement of offenses and punishment for attempt to commit the offenses. Then offenses by the companies. So all these things are there where they have a foolproof kind of and act wherein they can safeguard the communication or the information that is been passed through ICT technologies. Next chapter we'll be dealing is about the press ethics, most important chapter, right? So here, as part of that, what we'll be studying is, we'll try to understand that what exactly you mean by the journalism ethics. Then we try to understand that what are the ethical theories and the concepts. Then we have to also discuss about the honesty in war journalism and explain ethical issues in war reporting. So what exactly is ethics? See, ethics is basically where we feel that it is fundamental for the survival of the civilized society, as it is the cornerstone of the advanced civilization. And it is something where the word has been traced out from the Latin word called as ethicus and the Greek word called as ethikos, which means character and manners. Yeah. So basically we see ethics is a branch of philosophy where we try to talk about the human actions, attitudes, and behaviors. So ethics formulates ethical theories or principles under which individual human actions are evaluated as right or wrong. It is also called a moral philosophy. Yeah. One second. So ethic is something where it serves as a moral gatekeeper in identifying moral and immoral values and helps to resolve conflicting claims. So now coming back to the ethical theories and concepts, it is something that we see somewhere in 1850 that the word ethics was started to appear in journalistic discussion. The first use of word was in the heading of an article that criticizes the press that appeared in 1889. Then we see that, further to that, the code of ethics for journalists was formulated. So when we say ethics, there are two things to be noted. First thing is ethics refer to well-founded standards of right and wrong that prescribes what the human ought to be doing. Yeah. It could be in terms of rights, it could be in obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. Then ethics, for example, refers to those standards that impose the reasonable obligations to refrain from rape, stealing, murder, assault, slander, and fraud. So ethical standards include those that enjoy virtues of honesty, compassion, and loyalty. So when you are loyal, honest, and compassion, that means you have the ethical standards. So ethical standards include standards relating to rights. It is related to right to life, freedom, right to freedom from injury, and the right to privacy. Such standards are adequate standards of ethics because they are supported by consistent and well-founded reasons. So The first thing is that, we need to have a standards of right and wrong, and we as a human being need to follow that one. Then the second thing what we see as part of the ethic is to study and development of an ethical standard. Mentioned above, as we have just discussed, it's about the feelings, laws, and social norms can deviate from what it is ethical. So we see that it is constantly been examined, that we try to examine one's standard to ensure that they are reasonable and well-founded. Therefore, ethic also means the continuous efforts of studying our own moral beliefs and moral conduct and striving to ensure that we and the institution help to shape, live up to the standards that are reasonable and solid. So one thing is that we have to follow the well-founded standards, and at the same time, we have to study and analyze about the standards that we are following. However, we see that, there are three ethical theories. One is meta-ethics, second is normative ethics, then the third one is applied ethics. So when we are saying normal meta-ethics, it deals with the nature of moral judgment. It looks at the origins and the meanings of ethical principles. The normative ethics is with the content of moral judgments and the criteria for what is right or wrong. Then the third one is applied ethics that looks at the controversial topics like war, animal rights, and capital punishments. Yeah, so these are the three ethical theories we see. So ethical principles in journalism, what it is. One is obligated to deliver the truth. Yeah, basically, what the principles of journalism, and that has to be followed by ethic is obligated to deliver the truth, answer to the public, answerable to the public. Then third one is verification is a necessity. Then independence and press significant and relevant news. So obligated to deliver the truth. See, we understand what are the principles: accuracy, brevity, clarity. If you remember that, what are the principles of journalism. So there are certain principles and canons of journalism. It talks about the truth, balance, fair. It talks about unbiased reporting. It talks about delivering the truth. And being clear with the information. So all these things are part of the principles. So ethically, when we talk about the journalist has to be truth and have to start with the truth. And while he or she is trying to gather and test the facts, the journalist should try their best to convey the news without any bias and without subjecting to their personal opinion. Yeah. So objectivity is very important. So when you have an objectivity, then you don't become biased or have your own personal opinions. So what makes journalism so important is its power to be precise and to be, to be the basis for the deliberations, debates, and criticism. So the power of journalism lies in being precise and being a platform for the, talks, debates, and criticism. And this can only happen when there is a level field free from bias and interpretations of the news. Yeah. So opinion articles and all those things are different things. But when we are reporting, we have to see that, it should be away from being biased or from interpretations. That means following the objectivity. The second ethical principle of journalism is that in the field of journalism, the primary answerability is to the citizens, not to the sponsors or the shareholders. Yeah. So when we are talking about the democracy and journalism and media, we are answerable to the public. But unfortunately, how the scenario is, it is vice versa. We are being answerable to the government, we are answerable to the sponsors. So there is no objectivity. It is become a subjectivity. So that is why we feel that there are so many issues that have been uprooted in the field of journalism. So here we see that it is very important because it makes the medium of a public interest. Yeah, media is a medium of a public interest. Following this commitment, we need to make the news channels more credible, and certainly it should add to the goodwill of the public. Another important aspect is to cover all the sections of the society and not to ignore any particular society. And Ignore, and it should not ignore a particular sector to save it from public scrutiny. So, like for example, see, now we have this in the present situation where we have this Manipur issue, and PM going to the US and delivering and addressing a press conference. We don't see any press conference here by PM. So all these things are that, where we have to question and ask to the government, and they should not be kept away from the public scrutiny. Then verification is a must, though it is in traditional and conventional or offline media or online media. The verification is very important. Here we see that, what news is to be presented to a large extent should be based after it is thoroughly verified only. Yeah. So if they are trying to give any information, we have to see that, 5W1H is been answered, and also it has to be verified by the source of whoever it is giving or sharing the information. Yeah. When we talk of journalism acting objectively, we relate the concept to delivering transparent news, and transparency purely depends on the verification of the news. So without verification, there will be always a, that if you are not verifying, then there is a scope for a doubt and also misinformation. But at the same time, we see that, there is always something personal opinion of a journalist in the news items that they present. Therefore, we see that, journalists should deliver the truth that exists and the one that he wants to hear or present. So it is the method which prevents journalism from becoming a work of mere fiction. So that is how, if you are verifying thoroughly, then it is on the fact based. So therefore, it is not a fiction. Yeah. But unfortunately, we see so much of news reports coming on the fiction based. Yeah. If you see, especially the news, national news channels. Then independence, it is this, most important part of journalism, because it provides a sense of impartiality. Yeah, and that is unbiased reporting, and there is no partiality shown to anybody else. So there should be always the independence should be given and to be followed. Then we have a present, significant, and relevant news. So we should not forget that journalism is just not a piece of a story, but it is a story with a meaningful motive. Yeah, it is beyond attracting audience. It is not an advertisement that we can attract, but it is something having a meaningful motive, and it has to strike the correct note, and should present the interesting and what is significant to the public. Yeah. It should constantly scrutinize itself and decide what is meaningfully enough to be presented. The effectiveness totally depends on the amount of audience and the extent to which it serves its purpose. So those are the principles, ethical principles to be followed. Then press ethics and codes and a core code of conduct and problems of implementation. So as we understand that, that when we are referring to the media ethics, media ethics are the most important thing and primary thing that has to be followed. And we also see that, this journalism ethics dominate the media ethics, sometimes almost very important. So topics covered under journalism ethics include, so where is the area that we have to concentrate? It is, if the news has been manipulated, then you have to think of the ethics. So the governments and corporations may try to manipulate news media. For example, by censorship, corporation by share ownership. So the method of manipulation are subtle and many. So manipulation could be voluntary or voluntarily. Those being manipulated may not be aware of this. So this news manipulation should be, is what we see that, in due course, because of the government or to put their own concern, they will be taking, they will be trying to manipulate it. Then truth may be conflict with many other values also. Then there is a public interest where we have to see that, that the public interest is has to be taken care, and the sensitive issues, revelation of military secrets and other sensitive government information may be contrary to the public interest, even if it is true. So public interest is something where we cannot define, but at the same time that has to be protected. Then privacy. Privacy is something where we see that, publication is just not necessarily justified because the information is true, but privacy is somebody's right that has to be taken care of. Then fantasy is an element of an entertainment, and it has many fantasies and truths resulting in ethical dilemmas. Yeah. So then the photojournalist who covers war and disaster confront situation which may shock the sensitivities of their audiences. So human remains are rarely screened and should not be screened. The ethical issue is how far one risks shocking and incident sensitivities should be reported. Then conflict with the law. So journalist ethics may conflict with the law over issues such as confidential news sources. And there is a question to the extent to which it is ethically accepted to break the law in order to obtain news. For example, undercover reports may be engaging in deception, trespass, and similar frauds. So there is a conflict with the law also. So when we are talking about the ethics and when we situation demands, these are the issues that we come across, and but we have to ultimately see that it should be going on the basis of the principles. So ethics and politics of media conflicting views on fairness. There's a case study actually. So the aim of this contribution is to discuss the concept of fairness in journalism. We understand that fairness is the principle of justice and also one of the most important principles of journalism. So the analysis concentrates on the role the fairness principle plays in common acceptance, like media ethics, objectivity, or professional journalism. So in this perspective, fairness usually means to consider the entire aspect of public communication. We have to guarantee a fair reporting standards and social responsibilities, and we should see that that we should follow the fairness so that we are having a meaningful impact. Yeah. So there is one case study. We'll just look into this. A manufacturing company provides jobs for many people in small town. The company stayed in the town, though it could not find cheaper workers elsewhere because workers are loyal to the company due to the job it provides. Over the years, the company developed a reputation in the town for taking care of its employees and being a responsible corporate citizen. So the manufacturing process used by the company produces a byproduct that for years and flown into the town river. The byproduct has been considered harmless, but some people who live near the river have been reported illness. So the byproduct does not currently violate any anti-pollution laws. So what are the issues of integrity, ethics, and laws posed in this case study? What options does the company have and what it should do? So some of the issues raised by this case study include the factor and decision that led to the current situation, such as worker loyalty caused by scarce employment and power. Yeah, the company holds over the town. Whether the company is acting consistently with its reputation as a good corporate citizen or not, but it affects. We have to see that it should not affect its integrity. The ethics of companies compared to the person and whether companies should have more or fewer obligations and why. The company should take action even though the byproduct does not violate any laws. It should take action whether the company should establish criteria for helping. It will decide when to address the complaints that do not raise legal actions. So we have to look in the ethical aspects in such a way that, is there any problem with the current state of the law, or is the company can be justified for the non-action? Then the other case study is that a woman died recently after a short, unhappy life. She wanted her ashes to be scattered into the ocean near a place where she lived during the brief, happy times of her adult life. Her parents and immediate family had already passed away, so she discussed her wishes with mother-in-law and said she would comply with her daughter-in-law's wishes. In her will, the woman gave control of her estate to the mother-in-law. The will stated that woman's ashes should be scattered in the ocean and described above. Instead, her mother-in-law buried the ashes in the family plot near her home because she wanted to keep the ashes close to her because of her own grief. Now, assuming that mother-in-law is legally required to follow the wishes stated in the will, but that no one will check them, and it is very unlikely that mother-in-law will have any problem with the law. What are the issues of ethics and integrity and the law poses in the case study? What options does the mother-in-law, and what should she and do, and why? This is a story that has been quoted from the New York Times. So here, some of the issues raised by the case study include whether the mother-in-law is acting ethically and with integrity, the relevance of her promise to daughter-in-law and whether the promise is still relevant after the daughter-in-law is no more, the impact of law on the mother-in-law, and what difference it takes that the mother-in-law's legal activity is not likely to be discovered. So these are the certain areas while we do the reporting, taking into consideration the ethics to be followed. Now, another important factor is honesty in investigative journalism. So, investigative journalism is, as per se, a totally a different field where you have investigation, then you have to go in a deceptive manner to get the truth and the fact, or you have to maintain your confidential sources and all those things. So we see that these cover findings, the cover findings, the reportings and presenting news which other people try to hide. So it usually takes longer and requires more research than the routine news reporting. This is basically a vast field in itself, and in which in some ways encompasses the other fields covered. So in the view of a vast gamut of investigative reporting, the field will be covered in greater, we will be talking in the later units. But investigative journalism is what we see in the form of journalism which reports deeply investigating a single topic of interest, such as serious crimes, political corruptions, or corporate wrongdoings. An investigative journalist may spend months or years researching and preparing a report. Practitioners sometimes use the term watchdog reporting or accountability reporting. So basically, we see that investigative journalism has traditionally been conducted by newspapers, wire services, and freelance journalists. With the decline in the income through advertising, many traditional news services have struggled to fund investigative journalism, which in time consuming and therefore expensive. So journalists in investigation are increasingly carried out by the news organization working together and even internationally. We have such examples like Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, then we have leaks and Wikipedia leaks, then we have many to be stated. Yeah. So our organizations such as ProPublica, which have not operated previously as newspaper publishers and which rely on the support of the public and benefiters to fund their work. So the growth of media conglomerates have been accompanied by massive cuts in the budgets for investigative journalism. So these are the reasons because investigative journalism is a very big issue and has a time constraints and money demanding. So what are the norms and parameters for the investigative journalism? So basically it has three elements. It has to be the work of the reporter, and not of others or she or he is reporting. Then the subject should be of public importance for the reader to know, and it should be an attempt in being made to hide the truth. It should not be an attempt to try to hide the truth from the public. So the first one, what we see is that, it should be the work. So the investigative reporter should, as a rule, base a story on facts, detect and verify. So verification and fact is very important. So that way, it should be the purely a work deeply involved with the research to be done. Then there being a conflict between the factors require openness and clarity, and you have to maintain the necessary secrecy or the confidentiality, because the investigative journalism should strike and maintain her report a proper balance between openness, and there should be a proper balance of act between the public good and the confidential resources also. So investigative journalists should resist the temptation of quick gains. Imaginary facts should be avoided. The newspaper must adopt a strict standard of fairness and accuracy of the fact. The reporter must not approach the matter or the issue under the investigation in a manner that where he or anybody is getting prosecution should be approached in terms of being fair, accurate, and balanced in all proceedings, including the investigative journalism. The presentation and publication of the report should be guided by paramount principle of criminal jurisprudence, and that a person is innocent unless the offense alleged. The private life of anybody cannot be disturbed. Then the legal provisions of criminal procedure uh, should not be adopted on anybody, and the ethics should be maintained. And to say that the press should not publish any information, it is officially released. It should be officially released so that and then later on should be published. So these are the what we have to see in the investigative journalism. Then war reporting. Unfortunately or fortunately, we see that how the war or the surgical attack issues have been taken, reported. Then we have now we see this Russia-Ukraine war. So you can just read few reports to understand what are the ethical issues that have to be followed and that they have done during the reporting. So the coverage of war imposes major responsibilities on the reporters. On the one hand, they must exercise the greatest care first to see that they don't spread rumors. And at the second, and the other issue they should take care of is that they must expose themselves. They shouldn't expose themselves to the danger until and unless the situation demands. Yeah. But whatever they do, they must also be conscious that careless war reporting can cause untold harm in a tense situation. So here, the kinds of the weapons being used, we cannot go to an extent that of exposing our defense strategies and all those things. So you have to be careful. So there are certain principles of reporters for the reporters. So we have to be aware and be around, be organized, be curious, approach the approach is do the coverage with a sense of a purpose. Strong sources should be your main supportive, and it provides a good reporting. So this is all about the press ethics and codes that have to be taken care. This is then we will be moving to the block 4, which talks about ethics in photojournalism, press sociology, and news values in perspective. So this we will take in the next week. We have other 2 classes now. So we will take in the next week. Yeah. 1 second. So any queries, any doubts, anything you want to clarify? You all are there or not?
No, ma'am, no doubt.
Anything to be clarified? Anything to be discussed? You can leave in a message. I'm here till 11:30. If anything, you just go through this, the topics what we have discussed. So basically what we understand is that journalism definitely is a very good profession, but if it is followed by ethics and, with the law, then it will come with a very fruitful source. Unfortunately, can anybody discuss that how the present situation is going around in the reporting? Yeah. We see that so much of criticism is being there in the way they are reporting. To understand, you please see the present visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the US, how they have done the reporting, how they have given the information. And at the same time, we need to do a comparative study of Manipur incidents. So this will make you understand, because both are very important issues. Manipur going through this bad situation where their lives are so much disturbed. So what kind of, the mainstream media is not talking about that incidents, unfortunately. But at the same time, the visit to the US is been so much hyped. So what kind of journalism and what are the ethics to be followed there? Yes, of course, the event has to be reported because it is something international, international activity happening. But when our homes are dark, when your own house is in dark and difficult, we are trying to brighten and enlighten the society. So how fair it is. So principles of journalism talks about a fair reporting, giving mostly, ultimately the aim of the reporting should be where it should cater to the news that caters to the public interest, isn't it? So try to read news related to such events so that you understand that where the ethics are missing and where they have ethically reported, and where they are following the fairness, impartiality, being unbiased, following the objectivity. Fine? Is that okay? Any more doubts or anything, please leave a message. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So there seems to be no doubt or any discussion to be taken place. Shall I end the class?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Yeah. Is there anything that we will discuss, or shall I end the class?
Yeah, it's clear, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. If anything, please let me know.
Sure, ma'am.
Yes.